The letter trembled in Abigail O'Connor's hands as the stagecoach rumbled beneath her, kicking up clouds of dust that matched the color of her travel-worn skirts. September 1875, and she was heading toward a future with a man she'd never met, leaving behind the crowded streets of Boston for the vast unknown of Terlingua, Texas. The letter promised security, respectability, and perhaps, in time, affection. That's all a 20-year-old orphan with no prospects could hope for in this world. Almost there, miss, the driver called back. Terlingua's just over that ridge. Abigail tucked the letter from Walter Farley, her soon-to-be husband, into her reticule and straightened her bonnet. The journey had been long, dusty, and filled with second thoughts, but there was no turning back now. Her parents' deaths from influenza had left her with nothing but debts, and the advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like divine providence. Established rancher seeks genteel, educated woman of good character for marriage, must be willing to relocate to Texas, all expenses paid. The stagecoach crested the hill, and Abigail caught her first glimpse of Terlingua. It was smaller than she'd expected, a collection of wooden buildings stretched along a single street, with the vast expanse of the Chihuahuan Desert surrounding it on all sides. The heat was oppressive, even in early autumn, nothing like the crisp fall weather she was accustomed to in Massachusetts. "Which one is Mr. Farley's ranch?" Abigail asked as they approached the town. The driver let out a low whistle. "That'd be the Double F, about 3 miles east of town. Biggest spread around these parts, though that ain't saying much in this harsh country." The stagecoach pulled to a stop in front of the general store, and Abigail gathered her 2 small trunks containing everything she owned in the world. She stepped down onto the packed earth, her high-buttoned boots already coated with a fine layer of red dust. "You're the mail-order bride, ain't ya?" A gruff voice startled her. Abigail turned to see a weather-beaten man in his 50s approaching, his lips set in a thin line beneath an unkempt mustache. His eyes were cold, assessing her like livestock at auction. "I am Abigail O'Connor," she said, extending her hand. "Are you Mr. Farley?" The man grunted, ignoring her outstretched hand. "Walter Farley. Expected you yesterday." "The stagecoach was delayed in El Paso," she explained, dropping her hand awkwardly. "There was a problem with one of the wheels." HMPH. Walter looked at her luggage with disdain. "That all you brought? Not much of a dowry." Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I explained in my letters that I have no fortune, Mr. Farley, just my education and willingness to be a good wife." "We'll see about that." He grabbed one of her trunks and heaved it onto a waiting wagon. "Get in. Daylight's wasting, and there's work waiting." Abigail climbed onto the wagon, her heart sinking. This was not the welcome she had hoped for, but perhaps he was simply tired or having a difficult day. Surely, the man who had written those letters, formal but not unkind, would show himself soon enough. The ride to the ranch was silent and uncomfortable. Walter said nothing, and Abigail was too nervous to speak. When they finally arrived at the Double F, she was surprised by the state of disrepair. The main house was substantial but weathered, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and a bunkhouse sat about 100 yards away. "Home," Walter announced flatly, pulling the wagon to a stop. A gangly young man of about 16 hurried out to help with the horses. "This her pa?" "Yeah. This is Samuel, my son. Boy, help with her things." Samuel nodded at Abigail, his eyes curious but not unfriendly. He reminded her of a colt, all limbs and awkward movements. "Pleasure to meet you, Samuel," Abigail said with a smile. "Madam," he replied, ducking his head shyly. Walter led her into the house, which was as neglected inside as out. Dust covered most surfaces, and the furniture was sparse and worn. There was no sign of a woman's touch anywhere. Samuel's mother died 6 years ago, Walter said, as if reading her thoughts. Cholera, we get by. I'm very sorry for your loss, Abigail said sincerely. I lost my parents to influenza last year. Walter shrugged. Supper's at 6. Your room's upstairs, first door on the left. You can start cleaning tomorrow. Been without a woman's touch for too long around here. With that, he left her standing in the middle of the parlor, stunned by his abruptness. Abigail took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was her home now. She would make the best of it. Samuel appeared with her trunks. I'll take these up for you, Miss O'Connor. Thank you, Samuel. And please call me Abigail. The boy smiled, revealing a gap in his front teeth. Pa says you're from Boston. Never met anyone from that far east before. It's very different from here, she acknowledged, but I'm looking forward to learning about Texas. Samuel carried her trunks upstairs, and Abigail followed. Her room was small but had a window overlooking the ranch and the distant mountains. The bed was narrow, with a faded quilt that had seen better days. It's not much, Samuel said apologetically. It's fine, Abigail assured him, though her heart was sinking further. I'm sure I'll be comfortable here. Samuel lingered in the doorway. Pa's not always so. He's just been alone a long time, and the drought's been hard on everyone. Abigail nodded, touched by the boy's attempt to explain his father's behavior. I understand. Change can be difficult. After Samuel left, Abigail sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed the tears to come. What had she done? She was thousands of miles from anything familiar, about to marry a man who seemed to view her as nothing more than unpaid help. But what choice did she have? She couldn't afford passage back east, and she had nowhere to go even if she could. Wiping away her tears, Abigail began to unpack. She would make this work. She had to. The next few days were a harsh introduction to life on a Texas ranch. Walter expected Abigail to cook, clean, and help with various chores from dawn till dusk. He spoke little, and when he did, his words were often critical. The biscuits are burnt. You missed a spot on the floor. That ain't how we do things here. By the end of her first week, Abigail's hands were raw from scrubbing and her back ached from bending over the washtub. But she was determined to prove her worth and perhaps win some approval from her future husband. The wedding was set for the following Saturday, a mere 2 weeks after her arrival. Walter had made it clear it would be a simple affair at the local church, with only the preacher and a few neighbors as witnesses. On Thursday morning, Abigail was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. A rider appeared, a tall man atop a handsome chestnut gelding. He rode with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. "Morning, madam," he called, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was warm and melodious, with just a hint of a drawl. "Good morning," Abigail replied, shielding her eyes from the sun to get a better look at the stranger. He dismounted with fluid grace, leading his horse toward her. He was younger than Walter, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the Texas sky. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. "You must be Miss O'Connor. I'm Nathan Aldridge from the neighboring ranch." He extended his hand, and when Abigail took it, his grip was firm but gentle. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Aldridge." "Just Nathan, please." His smile transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I've been meaning to ride over and welcome you to Terlingua, but we've been busy with the cattle drive preparations." Before Abigail could respond, Walter emerged from the barn, his expression darkening when he spotted Nathan. "Aldridge, what brings you to my property?" Nathan turned, his posture relaxing but alert. "Just being neighborly, Farley. Wanted to welcome your fiancée to the area." Walter's jaw tightened. "She ain't your concern." Abigail felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment at Walter's rudeness. "Mr. Aldridge was just introducing himself, Walter." Walter shot her a look that made her step back instinctively. "Got work to do inside, girl. Best get to it." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly at Walter's tone, but his voice remained even. "Actually, Farley, I came to discuss the water rights issue. The creek's running low and my water on my land," Walter interrupted. "We've been through this before." "The creek crosses both our properties," Nathan said patiently. "And according to Texas law—" "I don't give a damn about your fancy law talk," Walter spat. "You educated types think you know everything." Abigail watched the exchange with growing unease. There was clearly bad blood between the two men. "I'm just suggesting we work together," Nathan said. "This drought's been hard on everyone." Walter stepped closer to Nathan, his hands clenched into fists. "I ain't sharing nothing with you, Aldridge. Now get off my land before I fetch my rifle." Nathan held his ground for a moment, then nodded curtly. "As you wish." He turned to Abigail and tipped his hat. "Miss O'Connor, it was a pleasure. If you ever need anything, the Aldridge Ranch is just over that ridge to the west." He mounted his horse with the same easy grace with which he dismounted and rode away without looking back. Walter rounded on Abigail the moment Nathan was out of earshot. "You stay away from him, you hear? Aldridges think they're better than everyone else because they've got book learning and money." "I was only being polite," Abigail defended herself. Walter grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You're to be my wife. That means you do as I say when I say it. Understand?" Fear bloomed in Abigail's chest as she looked into Walter's cold eyes. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before, something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." He released her arm, leaving red marks where his fingers had been. "Good. Now finish the laundry and start on supper. I want beef stew." As Walter stalked away, Abigail rubbed her bruised arm, fighting back tears. For the first time, she wondered if coming to Texas had been a terrible mistake. The day of the wedding arrived with ominous storm clouds gathering on the horizon, matching Abigail's dark mood. She had spent a restless night, her dreams filled with warnings, and her waking moments plagued by doubts. But what choice did she have? Walter had made it clear that he had paid for her passage and expected a return on his investment. Abigail dressed in her best gown, a pale blue silk that had belonged to her mother. It was slightly outdated by Boston standards, but it was the finest thing she owned. As she pinned her honey blonde hair into a simple chignon, she tried to summon some enthusiasm for the day. Perhaps marriage would soften Walter. Perhaps he would be kinder once she was officially his wife. Samuel knocked on her door, his young face solemn. "Pa says it's time to go." "Thank you, Samuel." Abigail took a final look in the small mirror. "How do I look?" "Real pretty, Miss Abigail," the boy said sincerely, "like a picture in a book." She smiled at him, grateful for his kindness over the past 2 weeks. Samuel had been her only ally at the Double F, helping her learn her way around and offering quiet encouragement when his father was particularly difficult. Walter was waiting by the wagon, dressed in what passed for his Sunday best, a worn suit that had seen better days and a clean shirt with a string tie. He barely glanced at Abigail as she approached. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, helping her into the wagon with less gentleness than he would show a sack of grain. The ride to town was silent, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Abigail's stomach churned with anxiety. Every instinct told her to run, to flee before it was too late. But the reality of her situation held her in place. She was alone in a foreign land, with no money and no connections. The church was a small, whitewashed building at the edge of town. A handful of people were gathered outside a few of Walter's ranch hands, the general store owner and his wife, and the preacher, a thin man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Reverend Johnson. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss O'Connor," he said, taking her hand. "Welcome to our community." "Thank you, Reverend," Abigail replied, forcing a smile. As they prepared to enter the church, the sound of a galloping horse drew everyone's attention. Nathan Aldridge appeared, riding hard toward them. He pulled his mount to a stop in a cloud of dust and dismounted quickly. "Reverend, I need to speak with you," he said urgently, "and with Miss O'Connor, privately." Walter stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Aldridge? This is my wedding day." "This can't wait," Nathan insisted, his eyes finding Abigail's. There was something in his gaze, concern, urgency, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of me," Walter growled. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Fine. Miss O'Connor, I don't think you should marry this man." A collective gasp rose from the small gathering. Abigail felt her heart race. "Mr. Aldridge, I don't understand." "Tell her, Farley," Nathan challenged. "Tell her what happened to your first wife." Walter lunged at Nathan, but the younger man sidestepped easily. "You shut your mouth, Aldridge." "Sophia Farley didn't die of cholera," Nathan continued, his eyes never leaving Abigail's. "She died from a fall down the stairs, a fall that happened after Walter beat her senseless." Abigail's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Walter, whose face was now a mask of rage. "Is this true?" She whispered. "It's a damn lie," Walter snarled. "Aldridge has always been jealous of what I've built. He's trying to ruin me." The Reverend stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Mr. Aldridge, these are serious accusations." "Ask Doc Miller," Nathan said firmly. "He treated Sophia many times before her death. Ask anyone who lived here 6 years ago. They all knew, but nobody said anything." The store owner's wife stepped forward hesitantly. "It's true," she said in a quiet voice. "We all suspected, but in those days, a man's home was his castle." Even the sheriff looked the other way. Walter's hand went to his belt where a pistol was holstered. "You're all against me," he hissed. "Always have been." "Pa, don't," Samuel pleaded, moving between his father and the others. In the moment of distraction, Nathan approached Abigail. "Miss O'Connor, I've got a buckboard ready. You can stay at my ranch until we arrange passage back east for you, if that's what you want." Abigail's mind was reeling. The bruises on her arm from Walter's grip had barely faded, if what Nathan said was true. "You ain't going nowhere," Walter growled, drawing his pistol. "I paid good money for you." The Reverend gasped. "Mr. Farley, put that weapon away immediately." "Stay out of this, preacher," Walter warned, leveling the gun at Nathan. "This is between me and Aldridge." Abigail saw Samuel's face contort with anguish. "Pa, please, this isn't right." Walter ignored his son, his attention fixed on Nathan. "You've been trying to take what's mine for years, Aldridge. First my water rights, now my woman." "She's not yours," Nathan said calmly, though Abigail could see the tension in his shoulders. "She's a free woman who deserves better than a life of fear and pain." Thunder rolled across the sky, and the first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy. Abigail felt as though she were in a nightmare, watching events unfold without being able to stop them. "Walter, please put the gun down," she said, taking a step toward him. "Let's talk about this." Walter's eyes flickered to her, and in that moment of distraction, Nathan lunged forward, grabbing Walter's wrist and forcing the gun upward. The pistol discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet harmlessly entering the church roof. The two men struggled for control of the weapon. Despite his age, Walter was strong from years of ranch work, but Nathan was younger and quicker. They crashed to the ground, rolling in the dirt as the rain began to fall harder. "Stop them!" Abigail cried, but the ranch hands seemed reluctant to interfere. Suddenly, Samuel darted forward and kicked the pistol from his father's hand, sending it skittering across the muddy ground. Nathan used the opportunity to pin Walter beneath him. "It's over, Farley," Nathan panted. "Let her go." Walter spat in Nathan's face. "She's nothing but a whore anyway. Probably been spreading her legs for you already." Abigail felt as though she'd been slapped. Walter's words cut deep, revealing the true nature of the man she had nearly married. Nathan stood, pulling Walter to his feet and holding him firmly. "Someone fetch the sheriff," he called. One of the ranch hands hurried off toward the sheriff's office as the rain poured down, soaking everyone to the skin. Abigail stood trembling, unsure what to do or where to go. Samuel approached her, his young face streaked with rain and tears. "I'm sorry, Miss Abigail. I should have told you sooner about my ma. I was just scared Pa would." Abigail pulled the boy into a hug. "It's not your fault, Samuel. None of this is your fault." Nathan handed Walter off to the remaining ranch hands and came to stand beside Abigail. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though in truth she was far from all right. "How did you know? About the wedding, I mean." "Samuel rode over last night," Nathan explained, glancing at the boy with approval. "Said he couldn't let his pa hurt another woman." Samuel looked down. "Pa was drinking last night, talking about how he'd make you behave once you were his wife. It scared me." The sheriff arrived, a burly man with a thick mustache who assessed the situation quickly. After speaking with the reverend and several witnesses, he took Walter into custody, leading him away through the rain toward the town jail. "What happens now?" Abigail asked, watching Walter disappear down the muddy street. "That depends on you," Nathan said gently. "My offer stands. You can stay at the rocking until you decide what you want to do. No strings attached." Abigail looked around at the bedraggled wedding guests, the rain-soaked church, and finally at Samuel, who stood looking lost and afraid. "What about Samuel?" Nathan's expression softened. "He's welcome too, of course. No boy should have to stay with a father like that." The decision wasn't difficult. Abigail had nowhere else to go, and the thought of returning to the Double F alone with Walter's eventual return was terrifying. "Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. We accept your offer." "Nathan," he corrected her with a small smile. "If we're going to be neighbors, even temporarily, you should call me Nathan." "Nathan," she repeated, and despite everything, Abigail felt a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. The rain continued to fall as they made their way to Nathan's buckboard. As Abigail climbed aboard, assisted by Nathan's strong hand, she couldn't help but feel that the downpour was washing away her old life, making space for whatever came next. The Aldridge Ranch, the rocking, was everything the Double F was not. The main house was a substantial two-story structure, well-maintained and surrounded by neatly fenced pastures. Outbuildings stood in good repair, and the bunkhouse looked comfortable and clean. Even in the pouring rain, Abigail could see that this was a prosperous, well-run operation. "It's not what I'm used to," Nathan said as he helped her down from the buckboard. "My father built most of it, and I've added to it over the years. We've been lucky with our cattle breeding program." "It's beautiful," Abigail said sincerely. They hurried inside, out of the rain that had soaked them all to the bone. The interior of the house was warm and inviting, with polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and the unmistakable signs of a woman's touch. "Nathan, you're drenched." A middle-aged woman with a kind face hurried toward them, carrying towels. "And who have we here?" "Mrs. Benson, this is Miss Abigail O'Connor and Samuel Farley. They'll be staying with us for a while." "Abigail, Samuel, this is Mrs. Benson, our housekeeper." "Mrs." Benson's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of the Farley name, but she quickly recovered. "Well, You poor things are soaked through. Let's get you dry and warm." She led Abigail upstairs to a guest room that was larger than the entire upper floor of Walter's house. "You can change into these," Mrs. Benson said, pulling a simple dress from a wardrobe. "It belonged to Mr. Aldridge's sister when she last visited. She's about your size." "Thank you," Abigail said, overwhelmed by the kindness. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you all for your help." Mrs. Benson patted her hand. "No need for that kind of talk. Mr. Aldridge told me what almost happened today. You just rest and get your bearings." After changing into the dry dress and wrapping a warm shawl around her shoulders, Abigail made her way downstairs. She found Nathan and Samuel in the kitchen, both in dry clothes, sitting at a large wooden table while Mrs. Benson served them hot coffee and soup. "Come sit, Miss O'Connor," Nathan invited. "Mrs. Benson's soup is the best cure for a chill." Abigail joined them, grateful for the warmth of the kitchen and the simple kindness being shown to her. As she sipped the delicious soup, a hearty vegetable and beef concoction that warmed her from the inside out, she studied Nathan Aldridge more carefully. He was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet confidence that put her at ease. His blue eyes were kind but intelligent, and when he smiled, it reached those eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that suggested he smiled often. "What will happen to my pa?" Samuel asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Nathan exchanged a glance with Abigail before answering. "The sheriff will hold him for a while. There might be a trial, depending on what Judge Parker decides when he comes through next month." "Will they hang him?" The boy's voice was small. "No, Samuel," Nathan assured him. "Your father's done wrong, but not that kind of wrong. Most likely he'll spend some time in jail or maybe have to pay a fine." Samuel nodded, relief evident on his young face despite everything. Abigail's heart went out to him. He was caught between loyalty to his father and the knowledge of Walter's cruelty. "What about the double F?" Abigail asked. "Who will look after things while Walter is away?" "I've sent 2 of my men over to tend to the livestock," Nathan explained. "The ranch isn't large, just a few dozen head of cattle and some horses. They can manage it until things are sorted out." Abigail was struck by his thoughtfulness. He had not only rescued her from a disastrous marriage, but had thought of the practical matters as well. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Nathan's eyes met hers. "It was the right thing to do." That night, lying in a comfortable bed in a clean, well-appointed room, Abigail thought about the day's events. She had come so close to making a terrible mistake. If Nathan hadn't intervened, she would be Walter Farley's wife now, subject to his cruelty and demands. Sleep eluded her as she contemplated her future. She had no money, no family, and now no marriage prospect. What would become of her? How long could she impose on Nathan Aldridge's generosity? As the rain continued to fall outside her window, Abigail made a decision. She would stay at the Rocking only until she could find work in town. Perhaps the general store needed help, or maybe the school needed a teacher. She had her education, her health, and her determination. Somehow she would make her way in this harsh land. The next morning, Abigail rose early, determined to make herself useful rather than be a burden. She found Mrs. Benson already at work in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Abigail greeted her. "May I help, Mrs.?" Benson looked surprised but pleased. "If you'd like to, you can set the table while I finish these biscuits." As Abigail arranged plates and silverware on the large kitchen table, she asked, "Has Mr. Aldridge lived here long, born and raised, Mrs.?" Benson replied, cutting biscuit dough with practiced ease. His father started this ranch with nothing but a few cattle and a dream, built it into one of the finest spreads in the county before he passed on 5 years ago. Nathan's been running things since then. And his mother died when he was just a boy. Consumption took her. That's why the education is so important to him. His mother was a school teacher, insisted he learn more than just ranching. Sent him back east to university in Philadelphia. Abigail was surprised. He's university educated, Mrs. Benson nodded. Studied agriculture and business. Came back with all sorts of new ideas that have made this place thrive, even during the drought. That explained his articulate speech and the books Abigail had noticed in the parlor the previous evening. Nathan Aldridge was not just a cowboy but an educated man who had chosen to return to his roots. What about his sister? Abigail asked, remembering the dress she now wore. Clara. She's married to a banker in Austin. Visits when she can, but she's expecting her second child, so travel's difficult right now. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Nathan himself, followed by a sleepy-looking Samuel. Nathan's eyes warmed when he saw Abigail, and she felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. "Good morning, Miss O'Connor. I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you. And please call me Abigail." Breakfast was a pleasant affair, with conversation flowing easily among them. Nathan outlined the day's work on the ranch, and Samuel eagerly volunteered to help. "I'm good with horses," the boy said. "Pa always said I had a way with them." Nathan nodded. "We could use your help in the stables then. Ramon, our horse wrangler, would appreciate an extra pair of hands." After breakfast, Abigail helped Mrs. Benson with the dishes. "I'd like to earn my keep while I'm here," she said firmly. "I can cook, clean, sew, whatever needs doing." Mrs. Benson studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You're not what I expected from a Boston lady." "My father was a doctor," Abigail explained, "but we weren't wealthy. My mother made sure I knew how to run a household properly." "Well, I won't turn down help," Mrs. Benson decided. "This is a big house for one woman to manage, but don't you go thinking you're a servant here. You're a guest, first and foremost." Over the next few days, Abigail settled into a routine at the Rocking A. She helped Mrs. Benson with household tasks during the mornings, and spent her afternoons exploring the ranch or reading books from Nathan's impressive library. Samuel seemed to flourish away from his father's harsh influence, working with the horses and learning from the ranch hands. On the third day, Nathan found Abigail in the garden, picking late summer vegetables for dinner. The sun had warmed her cheeks, and she had tied her honey blonde hair back with a simple ribbon. "You look at home here," Nathan observed, causing her to look up with a start. "It's easy to feel at home in such a beautiful place," she replied, straightening up with a basket of tomatoes and peppers. "Your garden is magnificent." "Mrs. Benson's work mostly," he admitted, "though I helped design the irrigation system." Abigail nodded, remembering Mrs. Benson's comments about his agricultural education. "Is that why your ranch is doing better than others during the drought?" "Partly," Nathan said, falling into step beside her as they walked back toward the house. "We've implemented some water conservation methods I learned about back east, and we've been selective about our cattle breeding to develop stock that's more suited to this climate." "That's impressive," Abigail said sincerely. Nathan shrugged modestly. "It's just good business sense." "But that's not what I came to talk to you about." He hesitated, then continued, "The sheriff rode over this morning. Walter's been released on bail." Abigail felt her stomach drop. "I see. He can't come here," Nathan assured her quickly. "That's a condition of his release." "But I thought you should know." "Thank you for telling me." Abigail tried to keep her voice steady. "Do you know what will happen next? There will be a hearing when the circuit judge comes through next month. Walter's claiming you breached your contract by not going through with the wedding." "Contract?" Abigail stopped walking, her grip tightening on the basket handle. "I never signed any contract." "The mail-order bride arrangement is considered a form of contract in these parts," Nathan explained gently. "Walter paid for your passage west with the expectation of marriage." "So I'm obligated to marry him?" Abigail felt panic rising in her chest. "No," Nathan said firmly. "No court would force a woman to marry against her will, especially given the circumstances, but there may be some financial consideration." Abigail felt sick. She had no money to repay Walter for her passage. "What will happen if I can't pay?" Nathan's expression softened. "Don't worry about that now. We'll figure something out." They continued walking in silence, Abigail's mind racing with worry. When they reached the house, she turned to Nathan. "I've been thinking about finding work in town, perhaps as a teacher or at the general store. I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "You're not imposing," Nathan said quickly. "In fact," he hesitated, then seemed to make up his mind. "In fact, I was going to offer you a position here." "A position?" "As Samuel's tutor," Nathan explained. "The boy's education has been neglected. He can barely read and his figures are worse. With your background, you could help prepare him for school when it starts again in the fall." Abigail considered the offer. It made sense. Samuel did need education, and teaching was something she could do well. "I'd be happy to tutor Samuel, but I'd need to find my own accommodation in town. I can't stay here as both your employee and your guest." Nathan looked like he wanted to argue but instead nodded. "I understand. There's a small cottage on the property about a half-mile from the main house. It was the original homestead before my father built this place. It's simple but comfortable. You and Samuel could stay there if you'd prefer." Relieved at the solution, Abigail agreed. "That would be perfect, thank you." Later that afternoon, Nathan took Abigail to see the cottage. It was indeed small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting area, but it was clean and well maintained, with a porch that offered a view of the rolling ranch land. "It will need a woman's touch," Nathan admitted as they stood in the main room. "But the roof is sound, and the stove works well." "It's lovely," Abigail said, already envisioning how she would arrange the sparse furniture. "Samuel and I will be very comfortable here." Nathan watched her as she explored the cottage, a thoughtful expression on his face. "We can move your things over tomorrow if you'd like, and I'll have some of the men bring furniture from the storage barn." That evening at dinner, Abigail told Samuel about the new arrangement. The boy seemed excited about having his own space but nervous about the tutoring. I'm not very good at book learning," he admitted, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Everyone learns at their own pace," Abigail assured him. "We'll take it slowly, and before you know it, you'll be reading adventure stories and calculating sums in your head." Over the next few days, Abigail and Samuel settled into the cottage, which they quickly began to call home. True to his word, Nathan provided furniture, linens, and even a small bookshelf filled with readers and arithmetic texts for Samuel's lessons. Abigail established a routine. Mornings were for lessons, afternoons for chores and Samuel's work with the horses, and evenings for reading and conversation. Nathan often rode over to check on them, sometimes staying for supper or bringing small gifts, a new book, fresh vegetables from the garden, or once, a kitten from a litter born in the barn. "Every home needs a cat to keep the mice away," he explained as Samuel delightedly cradled the tiny orange tabby. As the days passed, Abigail found herself looking forward to Nathan's visits. He was unfailingly kind, intelligent, and easy to talk to. They discussed books, ranching techniques, politics, and their hopes for the future. She learned about his dreams for the Rocking and shared her own memories of Boston and her parents. One evening, about 2 weeks after moving into the cottage, Abigail was sitting on the porch, enjoying the cool night air after a hot day, when Nathan rode up. He dismounted and joined her, settling into the second rocking chair. "Samuel asleep?" he asked, removing his hat and placing it on his knee. "Yes, we had a long day. He's making good progress with his reading." Nathan nodded approvingly. "I've noticed. He was reading the instructions on a feed bag yesterday without help." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently and watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "I received word from the sheriff today," Nathan finally said. "Walter's hearing is set for the 15th of next month." Abigail's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "What will happen? It's hard to say. Judge Parker is a fair man, but he's also a stickler for contracts. Walter's likely to demand repayment for your passage." "I see." Abigail stared out at the darkness. "And if I can't pay," Nathan hesitated. "There are other options. You could testify about his violent behavior. With supporting statements from witnesses, the judge might void the contract entirely." "Would that work?" "It's possible. Breach of implied terms, they call it." Walter represented himself as a suitable husband, but his history of violence makes that a false representation. Abigail considered this. The thought of standing up in court and discussing such personal matters was daunting, but if it freed her from any obligation to Walter, it would be worth it. "I'll do it," she decided. "I'll testify." Nathan reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. His touch was warm and reassuring. "You're a brave woman, Abigail O'Connor." She looked down at their joined hands, feeling a flutter in her chest. "Not brave. Just determined not to let fear rule my life." Nathan's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. "May I speak frankly, of course? These past weeks, getting to know you, have been special to me." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "I find myself thinking about you when you're not around, looking forward to our conversations." Abigail's heart raced. "I've enjoyed our time together as well." "I don't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable," Nathan continued. "You've been through a lot, and the last thing you need is another man making demands." "You're nothing like Walter," Abigail said firmly. Nathan smiled at that. "I hope not. What I'm trying to say, rather clumsily, is that I care for you, Abigail, more than I expected to. And when all this business with Walter is settled, I'd like to court you properly if you're willing." Abigail felt warmth spread through her body. The attraction she'd felt for Nathan had grown into something deeper over the week's admiration, respect, and yes, affection. But she was cautious. "I care for you too, Nathan, but I need time. And I need to know I can stand on my own 2 feet, not simply transfer my dependence from one man to another." Nathan nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I respect that. Take all the time you need, I'll be here." He brought her hand to his lips and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles before releasing it. The tender gesture brought tears to Abigail's eyes. This was how a woman should be treated, with respect and gentleness. They sat together on the porch for another hour, talking quietly about everything and nothing, before Nathan reluctantly took his leave. As she watched him ride away, Abigail felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life for too long. The day of Walter's hearing arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze, a welcome change from the heat of the previous weeks. Abigail dressed carefully in her best dress, the blue silk she had worn to her almost wedding, now cleaned and pressed. Her stomach was tied in knots as she and Nathan rode to town in his buckboard, Samuel between them. The courthouse was a small but imposing building in the center of Terlingua. As they approached, Abigail saw Walter standing outside with a man she assumed was his lawyer. Walter's eyes narrowed when he spotted her, and the hatred in his gaze made her shrink back involuntarily. "Don't let him intimidate you," Nathan murmured, placing a protective hand on her back as they climbed the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom was already filling with spectators. Word had spread about the mail-order bride who had refused to marry Walter Farley, and it seemed the entire town had turned out to watch the proceedings. Abigail held her head high, though her insides quivered with nerves. Judge Parker, a stern-looking man with a shock of white hair and bushy eyebrows, called the court to order precisely at 10 o'clock. Walter's lawyer presented his case first, arguing that Abigail had breached their agreement by refusing to go through with the wedding after Walter had paid for her passage west. My client expended the considerable sum of $75 to bring Miss O'Connor to Texas, the lawyer stated. In return, she was to become his wife and helpmate. By refusing to fulfill her obligation, she has caused my client financial harm and public humiliation. Judge Parker listened impassively, occasionally making notes. When Walter's lawyer finished, he called on Abigail. "Miss O'Connor, do you have legal representation?" "No, Your Honor," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "But Mr. Aldridge has kindly offered to speak on my behalf if the court permits." The judge glanced at Nathan. "Mr. Aldridge is not an attorney, but as this is not a formal trial, I'll allow it. Mr. Aldridge, you may proceed." Nathan stood, his presence commanding the attention of the room. "Thank you, Your Honor. I won't pretend to be a lawyer, but I do know something about contracts. For a contract to be valid, both parties must enter into it in good faith, with honest representations of what they're offering." He turned to face the courtroom. Walter Farley represented himself as a suitable husband, someone who could provide a safe and decent home for a wife. But Mr. Farley has a history of violence against women, specifically his late wife, Sophia. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Walter half rose from his seat, but his lawyer pulled him back down. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Aldridge," the judge said gravely. "Do you have evidence to support them?" "Yes, Your Honor. I've asked Dr. Miller to testify about the injuries he treated Mrs. Farley for during her marriage. I also have statements from 3 townspeople who witnessed Walter's mistreatment of his wife." The judge nodded. "Very well. Let's hear from the doctor first." Dr. Miller, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a solemn demeanor, took the stand and described the numerous injuries he had treated Sophia Farley for over the years: broken ribs, bruises, a dislocated shoulder, and finally, the fatal injuries from her fall. "In your professional opinion, doctor, were these injuries consistent with accidents as Mr. Farley claimed?" the judge asked. Dr. Miller shook his head. "No, Your Honor. The pattern and frequency of injuries suggested ongoing physical abuse. After the doctor, Mrs. Turner from the general store testified about seeing Sophia with bruises and once a blackened eye. 2 other witnesses corroborated this testimony. Throughout these testimonies, Walter grew increasingly agitated, his face flushed with anger. When it was his turn to speak, he unleashed his fury. "This is a conspiracy," he shouted. "Aldridge has turned the whole town against me because he wants my water rights, and now he's stolen my bride too." "Control yourself, Mr. Farley," Judge Parker warned. "One more outburst and I'll find you in contempt." Walter subsided, glaring at Nathan and Abigail. Finally, it was Abigail's turn to testify. She approached the front of the courtroom, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She described her correspondence with Walter, her journey west, and the treatment she had received upon arrival. "He made it clear that he viewed me as property he had purchased," she explained. "And when I disagreed with him or didn't complete a task to his satisfaction, he became angry. On one occasion, he grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises." She pulled up her sleeve to reveal the faint yellowing marks that still hadn't fully faded. "And what made you decide not to go through with the wedding, Miss O'Connor?" the judge asked. "When Mr. Aldridge revealed Walter's history of violence, I feared for my safety," Abigail said simply. "I believe that by concealing his violent nature, Walter misrepresented himself and the kind of life I would have as his wife." Judge Parker considered this, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. After a long moment, he spoke. "This is a troubling case. On one hand, we have a contract, implied if not written, where passage west was provided in exchange for marriage. On the other hand, we have substantial evidence that Mr. Farley misrepresented himself by concealing his history of domestic violence." He looked directly at Walter. "Mr. Farley, your behavior both in the past and here today leads me to believe that Miss O'Connor had justified concerns for her safety. In light of this, I find that you were in breach of the implied terms of your agreement by failing to disclose information that would have materially affected Miss O'Connor's decision to enter into the arrangement." Relief flooded through Abigail as the judge continued. "Therefore, I rule that Miss O'Connor has no financial obligation to you. Furthermore, given the testimony regarding your treatment of your late wife, I am referring this matter to the county prosecutor for possible criminal charges." Walter leapt to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "This is a travesty. You'll regret this, Aldridge, and you," he pointed at Abigail, "you'll get what's coming to you, you lying whore." "Bailiff, remove Mr. Farley from my courtroom," Judge Parker ordered, "and hold him on charges of contempt of court." As Walter was dragged away, shouting threats, Abigail felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was free, truly free for the first time since arriving in Texas. Nathan was at her side immediately, his face lit with relief and something more. "You were magnificent," he said softly, taking her hand. "It's over," Abigail breathed, hardly able to believe it. "Really over." Outside the courthouse, well-wishers surrounded them. Mrs. Turner patted Abigail's hand and assured her she'd always have a friend in town. Dr. Miller expressed his regret for not speaking up sooner about Sophia's abuse. Even the sheriff offered gruff congratulations on her escape. Samuel had been waiting outside during the proceedings, too nervous to watch. When Abigail told him what had happened, the boy's shoulders sagged with relief. "What'll happen to Pa now?" he asked. "He'll be in jail for a while," Nathan explained gently. "And he may face more charges about what happened to your mother." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I always knew deep down that it wasn't an accident. Ma was too careful on those stairs." Abigail's heart broke for the boy who had carried such knowledge for so long. "You're safe now, Samuel. We both are." The ride back to the rocking was quiet, each of them absorbed in their own thoughts. Abigail felt a mixture of emotions: relief, gratitude, and a burgeoning hope for the future. She glanced at Nathan, who caught her eye and smiled warmly. That evening, after Samuel had gone to bed, Abigail sat on the cottage porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The sound of hoofbeats announced Nathan's arrival, and her heart quickened at the sight of him riding toward her. He dismounted and joined her on the porch, taking the seat beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Relieved," Abigail admitted, "and a little overwhelmed. It's been quite a day." "Indeed it has." Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I got you something, a celebration of sorts." Curious, Abigail unwrapped the package to find a small book of poetry, Tennyson's collected works. "Oh, Nathan, it's beautiful. Thank you." "I remembered you mentioning he was your favorite," Nathan said, pleased by her reaction. "I ordered it from a bookseller in Austin weeks ago, but it just arrived yesterday." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Abigail deeply. "You're a good man, Nathan Aldridge." "I try to be." His eyes were serious as they met hers. "Abigail, now that the business with Walter is settled, I meant what I said about courting you properly. I know you need time, and I'll respect that, but I want you to know that my feelings for you have only grown stronger." Abigail felt a warmth spread through her chest. The past weeks had shown her the kind of man Nathan truly was: kind, honorable, intelligent, and gentle. She had begun to imagine a future with him, though she had tried to temper those thoughts until Walter was no longer a threat. "I don't think I need as much time as I thought," she admitted softly. "These weeks with you have shown me what a relationship should be like, built on respect and mutual admiration." Nathan's face lit up with hope. "Does that mean you'll allow me to court you?" "Yes," Abigail replied, her heart full. "I would like that very much." Nathan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "May I kiss you, Abigail O'Connor?" In answer, Abigail leaned toward him, and their lips met in a gentle, tender kiss that promised more to come. When they parted, Nathan's eyes were shining with an emotion that made Abigail's breath catch. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she replied, the words feeling right and true as they left her lips. They sat together on the porch as darkness fell, talking softly and sharing occasional kisses. For the first time since arriving in Texas, Abigail felt she had truly found her home. The courtship of Abigail O'Connor and Nathan Aldridge became the talk of Terlingua. Nathan was attentive and respectful, taking Abigail to town for dinners at the hotel restaurant, bringing her flowers from his garden, and spending long evenings in conversation on her porch. He never pushed for more than Abigail was ready to give, and his patience only deepened her growing love for him. Samuel flourished under Abigail's tutelage and Nathan's kind guidance. The boy's reading improved dramatically, and he showed a natural aptitude for mathematics once given proper instruction. More importantly, he began to smile more often and to speak about his hopes for the future. "Mr. Nathan says I could go to agricultural college someday, like he did," Samuel told Abigail one afternoon as they finished their lessons. "Do you think I could?" "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Samuel," she assured him, "and Nathan and I will help you every step of the way." As autumn deepened, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets, Abigail felt increasingly at home on the Rocking A. She had begun to take an active interest in the ranch operations, learning about cattle breeding, water management, and the financial aspects of running a successful ranch. Nathan encouraged her curiosity, explaining everything with patience and obvious pleasure in her interest. "You'd make a fine rancher's wife," he commented one day as they rode together across the property, checking on a new irrigation system Nathan had designed. Abigail smiled, knowing it was as close to a proposal as Nathan would come until he felt she was truly ready. "I'm beginning to think I would." In late October, news arrived that rocked their peaceful existence. Walter Farley had been released from jail after a local rancher posted his bail, and he had disappeared. The sheriff rode out to the Rocking to warn them. "He made some threats before he left town," Sheriff Davis told them grimly. "Said he had scores to settle." "I'd keep a sharp eye out if I were you, Aldridge." Nathan's expression was serious. "We'll be vigilant. I've got good men working here, and they're all aware of the situation." Despite Nathan's reassurances, Abigail couldn't shake a sense of dread. Walter's hatred had been palpable in the courtroom, and she knew he wasn't a man to let go of a grudge easily. "Maybe Samuel and I should go to Austin for a while," she suggested that evening. "Stay with your sister until things settle down." Nathan shook his head. "I don't want to let fear drive you away from your home. We'll be careful, but we'll face this together." His words calling the ranch her home warmed Abigail's heart despite her worries. She was touched by his determination to protect her and Samuel without sending them away. 2 days later, disaster struck. Abigail was hanging laundry behind the cottage when she smelled smoke. Looking up, she saw a plume of dark smoke rising from the direction of the main ranch house. "Samuel," she called urgently. The boy emerged from the cottage where he had been studying. "Stay here. There's a fire at the main house. I'm going to see if they need help." Before Samuel could protest, Abigail gathered her skirts and ran toward the smoke. As she crested the small rise between the cottage and the main house, her heart nearly stopped. The bunkhouse was engulfed in flames, and ranch hands were frantically forming a bucket brigade from the well. Nathan was in the thick of it, shouting orders and passing buckets. Relief flooded Abigail at the sight of him safe, but it was short-lived. As she hurried toward them, a movement caught her eye, a figure slipping from behind the barn, heading toward the main house with something in his hands. Even at a distance, she recognized Walter Farley. "Nathan," she screamed. "Walter's here, he's going to the house." Nathan's head whipped around, first toward Abigail, then toward the main house. He dropped the bucket he was holding and sprinted toward his home, drawing his revolver as he ran. Abigail followed, her heart pounding with fear. As she neared the house, she heard shouts and then a gunshot that made her blood run cold. She hesitated, uncertain whether to proceed or seek help. A second gunshot decided her. Gathering her courage, Abigail approached the house cautiously, picking up a heavy stick as she went, a poor weapon, but better than nothing. The front door stood open. Inside, she could hear men's voices, angry, threatening. Moving as quietly as possible, Abigail entered the house. The scene in the parlor made her gasp. Nathan was on the floor, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. Walter stood over him, a revolver pointed at his head. "You took everything from me, Aldridge," Walter was saying, his voice thick with hatred. "My woman, my son, my reputation. Now I'm going to take everything from you. The only one who ruined your reputation is you, Farley," Nathan replied, his voice strained but steady. "You did that all on your own when you beat your wife to death." Walter's face contorted with rage. "Shut up. You don't know nothing about me and Sophia." "I know enough," Nathan said. "And so does everyone else now. Killing me won't change that. It'll just get you hanged." Walter's hand tightened on the revolver. "Maybe, but I'll die knowing I took you with me." Abigail knew she had to act. Walter's back was to her, his attention fixed on Nathan. Moving as silently as possible, she raised the stick and brought it down with all her strength on Walter's arm. Walter howled in pain, the revolver flying from his grasp. He whirled to face Abigail, his eyes wild with fury. You ruined everything." He lunged for her, but Nathan, despite his wound, tackled Walter from behind, bringing him crashing to the floor. The two men grappled, Walter's rage giving him strength despite Nathan's superior size and fitness. Abigail scrambled for the fallen revolver, her fingers closing around the grip just as Walter gained the upper hand, pinning Nathan beneath him. Walter raised his fist to strike, but froze when Abigail cocked the revolver. "Don't move, Walter," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I will shoot if I have to." Walter's eyes narrowed. "You ain't got the stomach for it, city girl. Try me," Abigail replied, steadying the revolver with both hands. "I won't let you hurt anyone else." For a long, tense moment, Walter stared at her, weighing his options. Then, with a snarl of frustration, he raised his hands. "Fine, you win. Again." Nathan pushed Walter off him and got to his feet, grimacing with pain. Blood soaked his shirt from the shoulder wound, but he seemed steady enough. He quickly bound Walter's hands with his own belt. "Abigail, ride for the sheriff," Nathan instructed. "I'll keep an eye on our friend here." "You're hurt," she protested. "It's just a graze, I'll be fine. Go quickly." Reluctantly, Abigail handed Nathan the revolver and hurried out. As she passed the bunkhouse, she saw that the ranch hands had managed to extinguish the fire, though the building was badly damaged. She grabbed the reins of a saddled horse and rode hard for town. Sheriff Davis and 2 deputies returned with her, taking Walter into custody. This time, the sheriff assured them Walter would be held without bail until his trial. "He'll hang for this," the sheriff said grimly. "Arson and attempted murder. Judge Parker won't show any mercy, especially not after the previous charges. Dr. Miller, who had ridden out with the sheriff, tended to Nathan's wound. "You're lucky," he told Nathan as he bandaged the shoulder. "The bullet just grazed you. Any closer and we might be having a very different conversation." That evening, after all the excitement had died down, Abigail sat with Nathan on the porch of the main house. His arm was in a sling, but his spirits were high. "You were very brave today," he told her, his eyes full of admiration. "I'm not sure I would have made it out of there without you." Abigail shook her head. "I was terrified, but the thought of losing you—" She trailed off, emotion catching in her throat. Nathan reached for her hand with his good one. "I realized something today, Abigail. Life is too short and too unpredictable to wait for the perfect moment." He took a deep breath. "I love you. I've loved you since the day you stood up to Walter outside the church, with rain pouring down and your chin held high. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "Are you proposing, Nathan Aldridge?" "I am," he confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not very romantically, I'm afraid, with one arm in a sling and the smell of smoke still in the air, but with all my heart." "Yes," Abigail said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you. I love you, Nathan." His kiss was tender but full of promise. When they parted, Nathan looked into her eyes with a mixture of love and hope. "What about Samuel? He's become so important to both of us." "I was thinking," Abigail said slowly, "that we might adopt him, legally, I mean." With Walter likely to spend the rest of his life in prison, Samuel will need a family. Nathan's face lit up. "That's a wonderful idea. We'll talk to him tomorrow, see how he feels about it." They spent the rest of the evening planning their future together: the wedding, the adoption, the improvements they wanted to make to the ranch. It was after midnight when Nathan finally insisted on escorting Abigail back to the cottage, despite his injury. "I'm perfectly capable of walking back alone," she protested. "Humor me," Nathan replied. "I came too close to losing you today. I'd like to keep you in my sight a little longer." The next morning, they spoke to Samuel about their engagement and the possibility of adoption. The boy's reaction was everything they could have hoped for. "You mean I'd really be your son?" he asked, his eyes wide. "Like legally, if that's what you want," Nathan confirmed. "We both love you, Samuel, and we want you to be part of our family." Samuel launched himself into their arms, nearly knocking Nathan off balance. "Yes, that's better than anything I could have wished for." They were married on a crisp November day, with the mountains providing a magnificent backdrop for the ceremony. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which was held on the rocking A. Mrs. Benson outdid herself with the wedding feast, and even Nathan's sister Clara made the journey from Austin, bringing her husband and young son to meet Abigail. "I'm so happy for my brother," Clara told Abigail as they watched Nathan dancing with a group of children, his face alight with joy. "I've never seen him like this. He's made me happier than I ever thought possible," Abigail confessed. "When I came to Texas as a mail-order bride, I was hoping for security and perhaps a little contentment. I never dreamed I would find real love." Clara squeezed her hand. "Sometimes life's greatest blessings come from its biggest disappointments. I'm just glad my stubborn brother finally found the courage to let someone into his heart." Samuel was officially adopted a month after the wedding, taking the Aldridge name with pride. The boy who had once been quiet and fearful blossomed under their care, becoming a confident young man with dreams of his own. Walter Farley was tried and convicted of arson, attempted murder, and the death of his first wife. Judge Parker sentenced him to hang, but the sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment when Samuel wrote a letter to the court, showing a capacity for forgiveness that moved even the stern judge. "I can't forgive what he did to my mother," Samuel told Nathan and Abigail. "But I don't want his death on my conscience. He's got to live with what he did, and that's punishment enough." The years that followed brought many changes to the Rocking A. Nathan's innovative ranching methods attracted attention throughout Texas, and ranchers came from as far away as Montana to learn his techniques for breeding drought-resistant cattle and conserving water. Abigail became an integral part of the ranch operations, managing the financial aspects and eventually starting a small school for the children of their ranch hands. Her experience as Samuel's tutor had awakened a passion for teaching, and Nathan encouraged her to pursue it. Their family grew with the birth of a son, William, in the spring of 1877, followed by twins, James and Elizabeth, 2 years later. The Aldridge home was filled with laughter, learning, and love. Samuel, true to his early promise, attended agricultural college in Austin, returning to the Rocking A with new ideas and techniques that complemented Nathan's. Together, father and son, for that was how they thought of each other now, expanded the ranch's operations, making it one of the most successful in Texas. On a warm evening in the summer of 1885, 10 years after Abigail first arrived in Terlingua, she sat on the porch of their home with Nathan, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now a handsome young man of 26, was showing 7-year-old William how to throw a lasso while the twins chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Did you ever imagine our life would turn out this way?" Abigail asked, leaning her head on Nathan's shoulder. "Not in my wildest dreams," he admitted, his arm tightening around her. "When I rode to town that day to stop your wedding, I was only thinking of saving you from a cruel fate. I never imagined I was riding toward my own happiness." Abigail smiled, remembering the rain-soaked day that had changed the course of her life. "I'm glad you were brave enough to speak up. And I'm glad you were brave enough to listen," Nathan replied, kissing her tenderly. "You know, for a mail-order bride who never quite made it to the altar the first time, you've made a remarkable rancher's wife." "For a neighboring cowboy who offered sanctuary," Abigail teased back, "you've made a rather wonderful husband." As the sun set over the Chihuahuan desert, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a frightened young woman fleeing grief and poverty to a confident wife, mother, and teacher. The path had not been easy, but every step had led her to this moment, to this family, to this love, and she wouldn't change a single thing.